Hello and welcome to Straight Bat, my weekly video blog where, as the title suggests, I comment with a straight bat. Now I want to start this week's video blog with a bit of a personal note. My late grandfather was a distinguished police officer, 1943 Imperial Police batch, later on of course part of the prestigious Indian Police Service post-independence, and he belonged to the old Bombay cadre. Now in 1960, that old Bombay cadre was divided because you had two states. Bombay was divided into Maharashtra and Gujarat. And my grandfather, who was a Maharashtrian, was keen to stay back in Maharashtra because police officers were given the choice. However, my grandfather had worked very closely with the late Morarji Desai when Morarji Bhai was Chief Minister of Bombay, later on of course Finance Minister and then Prime Minister, and they worked together closely on prohibition in the old Bombay state. So Morarji Bhai comes to him in 1960 and says, Pant, my grandfather's name was Parshuram Pant, Pant Sahib, I want you to come with me to Gujarat because we have very few Gujarati police officers. I need you. My grandfather found it very hard to resist Mr. Desai's repeated demand on him, and he moved to Gujarat. He said for a few years. As it turned out, he stayed on there for his entire professional life, retiring eventually as the longest serving Inspector General Police of Gujarat in the 1970s. Why am I telling you this story? Well, quite simply because Gujarat IPS officers are in the news. This week, Rakesh Asthana, a Gujarat IPS officer from the 1984 cadre, has become the Delhi Police Commissioner, one of the most powerful and prestigious posts in the country. Now, Mr. Asthana is not just another police officer, nor was this an ordinary appointment. Mr. Asthana was due to retire on July 31st, and just 4 days before he is to retire, he is made the Delhi Police Commissioner, overriding the seemingly highly qualified and meritorious claims of several other Agmut cadre officers. Now remember, this is the cadre from which the Delhi Police gets its officers, the UT cadre, Union Territory cadre, and only on 3 previous occasions has someone from the outside been made Delhi Police Commissioner. Now, Mr. Asthana becoming Police Commissioner in a sense only reflects how powerful this one individual has become in recent times. He has been a special director of the CBI. He has been Director General of Civil Aviation Security, Border Security Force Chief, Narcotics Control Bureau Head. No one in the history of the IPS, or certainly not in the Gujarat cadre, has held so many prestigious posts in the national capital in such a short period of time. None of this, I might also add, is without controversy. During his tenure as CBI Special Director, Asthana was involved in a bitter personal feud with the then Director Alok Verma. The two of them made serious corruption and bribery allegations against each other. In fact, an NGO had even gone to court to stop Asthana's appointment, claiming that he was being investigated in a 2012 corruption case in Gujarat. Now, you have a situation where your two top officers in the CBI are involved in an unprecedented war of words. Eventually, the government is forced to step in. So suddenly in 2018, Alok Verma at midnight, in what can only be described as a midnight coup, is removed as CBI director, allegedly because he was to file an FIR in the Rafale case. Verma, who as I said was gunning for Asthana, even was keen to file an FIR against him, is shunted into oblivion. Mr. Asthana is also removed, but only to be reinstated in various key posts, which I mentioned a short while ago, and even the corruption charges, eventually he is given a clean chit in those cases. Now, in fact, we are told that the Modi government was keen to make Mr. Asthana the new CBI director a few months ago in May this year, only for the Supreme Court to block the appointment, citing the guidelines made by the Supreme Court in the Prakash Singh case in 2018 that you will not appoint someone as police chief when he has less than 6 months left for retirement. Prakash Singh, remember, was himself a distinguished police officer who had gone to the court calling for police reforms and for separating the police from political interference. I hope you are understanding the chronology here. Chronology samjhe mere dosto, my friends. Two top CBI officers are in a feud with each other, making corruption allegations. Eventually, both of them are removed. One of them is shunted into oblivion, while the other, who interestingly was brought from Gujarat to Delhi around the same time that Mr. Modi becomes the Prime Minister of the country, is put in several important posts, eventually culminating this week in his becoming the Delhi Police Commissioner, apparently because of special public interest. On deputation, he has been brought to the Delhi police force just 4 days before his retirement. Now, would one be justified or not to ask why this special treatment for Mr. Asthana? Why is it that in the case of the Delhi Police Commissioner's appointment, the rules of the Prakash Singh case laid down by the Supreme Court have not been followed? Rules which were emphasized by the present Chief Justice, Mr. Ramanna. Was the UPSC consulted before this appointment was made? Was due process followed? What is the message that has been sent out to the cadre of the Agmut, the Union Territory cadre? And dare I say, what is the message that has been sent out to young police officers in the country? The impression, naturally, my friends, is that Mr. Asthana is the blue-eyed boy of the Prime Minister. Nothing wrong in that per se. Let's be clear. Every politician tends to have people he or she is comfortable with. When Narasimha Rao became Prime Minister, number of people from Andhra Pradesh were part of his Prime Minister's office. When Deva Gowda became Prime Minister, there was a Karnataka touch. When Mr. Vajpayee became Prime Minister, the Uttar Pradesh officers reasserted their supremacy. Now, with Mr. Modi, it is now clearly a case of Khushbu Gujarat ki. Because you have a number of IAS and IPS officers from the Gujarat cadre who in the last 7 years have come to occupy key posts in the Prime Minister's office and indeed in several government departments. And yet you get a sense that Mr. Asthana is a little different, a special case whose rise up the police force in a way has coincided with the move of Mr. Modi from Gandhinagar here to New Delhi. And therein lies, my friends, the chronology and the backstory that you must know. For which I hope you will also read my book once again, 2019, How Modi Won India, page 12, where I tell the story of how I met Mr. Asthana for the first time in April 2002, soon after the Godhra train burning and the riots that followed. Mr. Asthana had at that time been appointed the head of the special task force to investigate the train burning case. And I asked him about it and he said, prima facie, the investigation suggested that the train burning was the result of a spontaneous act of violence committed because of a clash that had taken place between the local Muslims living near the Godhra area who were engaged in stone pelting and the VHP car sevaks who were inside the train. Remember, spontaneous act is what I was told. And yet just a few weeks later, I am surprised to find that the STF official report says that the train burning was a pre-planned conspiracy, an act of terror with cross-border links. How did this report suddenly change in a few weeks from what Mr. Asthana told me on record to what the report now said? Remember, Mr. Modi in that successful 2002 Gujarat campaign made Mr. Asthana's STF report an integral element of his campaign, telling people that Godhra was a pre-planned conspiracy with terrorist links. Now, I am not suggesting for a moment that there is a direct connection between Mr. Asthana being the STF chief in the Godhra case and his subsequent rise in the Modi years. That I leave for you to decide. My job today was to tell you the chronology and the backstory to the rise of a police officer. It's a chronology that I believe tells you a lot about the state of our police force, how key appointments are made, and indeed possibly how politics takes place in the times in which we live, the times of Modi Raj. Mr. Asthana is a product of those times. Think about it. That was the Straight Bat. Remember, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel for many more such videos. For now, stay well, stay safe. Namaskar. Jai Hind.